Hello and welcome. Before we start, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today and recognise that these have always been lands where learning has taken place by storytelling and through the sharing of experiences. We pay our respect to elders past, present and emerging. My name's Anthony, and on behalf of CIM, I'd like to welcome you to this webinar, which is the latest in a series of webinars. And today we're going to take a deep dive into the NABERS Indoor Environment as a tool for us to prioritise tenant experiences. Throughout the webinar today, if you've got any questions, please feel free to send them through using the Q&A function, and we'll do our best to answer them. If you've got something for one of our panelists specifically, please let me know who that is for specifically, and we'll make sure that we ask the right person your question. If we don't get to your questions, we'll try to follow them up after the event is completed. And just on that, when the webinar ends today, you'll be asked to complete a short feedback survey. It only takes a second or two to do, but please do that because it really does help us with making sure that future webinars meet the needs of you as our customers and friends out there. So let's get things going today. We have three amazing panelists on today. We have Ron Pulido, the sector lead at NABERS. How are you doing, Ron?
Doing good. Thanks
Katrina,
for having me.
Pleasure. Katrina Itin, the Sustainability Advisor at Growthpoint Properties, and Howie, Mann, the VP of Product at CIM. So thanks, guys, for being with us today. If you've been to one of the CIM webinars before, you know we usually dive straight into a long panel discussion, and we ask lots of questions and give people lots of chances to engage in that way. We're going to do things a little bit differently today. We're going to start with Ron giving us a bit of an overview of the NABERS internal environment, indoor environment platform and what that all means. Then we're going to have a bit of a discussion around that topic. And to close us out, Howie's going to pray very closely to the demo gods and hope that a software demo of CIM's dedicated module for tracking indoor environment conditions works for us. But he's going to talk about that platform and what it can do. So let's kick things off straight away and get right into it. Ron's going to give us his short presentation about the NABERS Indoor Environment. Let's get things going, Ron.
All right. Thank you very much, Anthony, and good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Ron Pulido. I'm a sector lead at NABERS, and I work very closely with stakeholders across the industry, such as yourselves, to help improve the indoor environment and support sustainability outcomes in buildings. So I find it's always helpful to set a little context of who NABERS is and what we do. So I'll give you a very, very brief rundown of that. NABERS is a national sustainability program, and we develop sustainability tools that help buildings measure and manage their operational performance and emissions that they generate. So with this, we provide a language for sustainability, and we do that through our star rating system so that it's understandable for everyone. So from the tenant to the facilities manager to the owner, investors, decision makers, you don't need to be a technical expert, and you just need to know what the star result means in the star scale. That's why stars are such a good way to communicate. You know, if you're getting somewhere around the 3 mark, that means you're about at the average market standard. And you know, if you're getting a result around a 6, that means you're on the leading end of the scale. But we have other sustainability tools as well, not just indoor environment. These go hand in hand with understanding the performance metrics of your building around energy, water, waste, carbon neutral, and we're also working on an embodied framework and carbon tool. We have tools for all types of buildings as well, and that's particularly useful because we know that asset portfolios possess a number of buildings across multiple sectors, noting here that the indoor environment tool is currently only available for offices, but right now I'm looking into that and asking the question of, you know, what sectors need us to expand our indoor environment tool to their building type. Now about the indoor environment. So why should you focus on the indoor environment? Why should you care? Why should asset owners, facility managers, tenants, for example, care about the indoor environment? So we, seen through a combination of industry research, building case studies, stakeholder consultation, that these are the 3 main areas of impact around health and well-being, climate resilience, and value to the asset, where with health and well-being, you know, poor indoor environmental quality can lead to a range of health problems for occupants. A better indoor environment can lead to improved productivity and comfort. With climate resilience and the indoor environment, we think about the building's impact on its occupants and the building's ability to handle climate variability and extreme weather events, and being able to optimize the building design and operations to maintain a stable indoor environment and to do that efficiently, because you can actually have a high-performing indoor environment building and also have it operationally be energy efficient. And with the value to asset and tenants, it makes it more desirable to buyers, investors, tenants, given their enhanced health, comfort, and sustainability features. This is normally reflected in increased asset value and rental yields, and it also makes it attractive to tenants who prioritize the health and productivity of their people. Because when you can prove that you've got a good indoor environment, it gives you those leadership credentials, and it shows that you understand and you care about the social as well as the environmental aspects of sustainability. So we've seen that more people are becoming conscious about the state of the indoor environment in their buildings. In the past few years alone, we've seen a significant uptake of our indoor environment tool, as you can see on the graph on the screen. So from the financial year 2018, where we had about 65 ratings, to just last financial year, where we've had 309 ratings, these aren't just one-off ratings as well. So a significant number of these buildings actually re-rate because they see the value in being able to baseline, measure, and manage the performance of their building. And you can probably see the uptick started around 2019, 2020. It's no coincidence that this is actually around the time when we had those devastating bushfires around Australia. And of course, the most recent COVID pandemic shortly afterwards. And so I remember sitting in the office in the city, and you could actually visibly see the smoke creeping in and circulating around the building. This actually highlighted the impact of outdoor air quality on indoor spaces, and it showed firsthand to people who got to experience that same thing, the effect of smoke and particulate matter from the fires and the building's ability to deal with that. Let's look into an example of a portfolio that uses NABERS Indoor Environment. So we did a case study of ISPT's office portfolio between 2017 and 2018. You can actually see that over time, from when they rated, ISPT was able to gradually increase the average rating across their buildings. And look, 4.2 is still a very good rating. And this is a portfolio average we're talking about. It's above market average, of course. 5.5 is even better, but I think what's more important here to see and take away from this is not the actual star rating itself, but that improvements were made. So it gives you that baseline to start asking targeted questions and setting goals for future years. And you could be a portfolio that's just getting started, and that's okay because everyone needs to start somewhere. So this doesn't happen coincidentally. It actually takes a strategic focus and commitment across many teams in that organization, as you can see from the quote itself, as well as working closely with their customers and being able to have that impact. It takes an understanding and conscious focus on the health and well-being, amongst other things, of the people who will be inside that building and knowing how to provide them with a building and a space that's suitable for their needs. So ISPT is an example of an organization that exemplified that in their portfolio. The good thing is that there are many organizations just like ISPT who are just as committed to the performance of their indoor environment, such as Growthpoint, who we've got on the panel today. You can actually see this on our NABERS Sustainable Portfolios Index. This is available on our website. And so this is a public report that we do annually, and it showcases the environmental performance of some of Australia's leading portfolios across not just the indoor environment, but also energy, water, and waste. And to me, I think one of the best things is that this is completely voluntary. These organizations aren't mandated to do it. We don't tell them they have to do it. They're putting themselves out there and being fully transparent about the performance of their buildings. And this sort of transparency is a good thing. It's good for the industry. It broadens the conversation around sustainability performance, and it also helps elevate and drive sustainability outcomes in the built environment. So I'm always conscious of sounding like I'm speaking on another organization's behalf. So I put up some other quotes from other organizations on their use of the NABERS Indoor Environment from their buildings, on their buildings. So a big thing I like about the words on the screen here is that, there's a focus on the benefits to the people that will be in the building, and that these organizations themselves, they value the investment in being able to provide these comfortable and quality spaces for the tenants of the building. I'll give you a quick rundown because I'm also conscious of time of what the actual tool is, because I've been talking about indoor environment and why it's important. That image on the right, I'll explain what that means as we go through the next few slides. But when you go through this rating process, your building gets assessed to a set of benchmarks that reflect industry standards, and then that's supposed to show the overperformance of your building and its indoor environment. So we break it down into these 5 categories of thermal comfort, indoor air quality, acoustics, office layout, and lighting. And depending on how you rate the building in terms of base building, whole building, and tenancy, it'll be slightly different. But with all of them, the idea is that we use quantitative and qualitative data to measure and assess the level of comfort, well-being, and ultimately satisfaction in the building. So running through them, thermal comfort, this is important because it is directly linked to people's productivity. It's very important to their satisfaction and well-being. The indoor air quality impacts the comfort, well-being, and productivity. Research shows that there is a strong relationship between good indoor air quality and the employee's performance at work. Acoustics play an important role. Noise can be a significant distraction to office occupants, and there are things that could be attributed to building-based sources and occupant-based sources. We've also got the office layout, and that can be important because it has the potential to impact staff productivity. This component in particular measures staff's perceived level of comfort within the office spaces. And lighting is also important because light and glare has the potential to impact people physically and also physiologically, affecting both productivity and their general well-being. So these are all packaged up and assessed to give you your overall star rating, but you don't just get that certificate that gives you the star result. You also get this rating report, which breaks down how you scored in each of those components that we ran through. And it also breaks it down specifically for that component where you placed in the benchmark. So this is particularly useful because it helps you with formulating those questions that I mentioned, the questions to understand why the result is what it is. And I'll run you through a quick example. So let's say I just received the report from my building. I'm probably immediately thinking, okay, the low score I got was in the acoustics category. Why was it that low, or why was it the lowest out of all of them? I'll then work with my neighbor's assessor, my facilities manager, and even with the tenants to break it down and go from there. So let's look at another example. Let's go air quality category. Looks like we did good in the ventilation effectiveness parameter. And oh, look, it looks like it actually might be one of the higher scores across all of my buildings. So let me take a look to see what this building did differently compared to my other buildings, and maybe we can find some immediate low-hanging fruits or optimizations to elevate the portfolio as a whole. So there's a whole lot more to NABERS ratings than just getting the star result. I'd love to talk about it a bit more. Try to do my quick 10-minute run through. Hopefully I'm within time. But feel free to drop it in the queue, any questions you might have in the Q&A, or even feel free to reach out to myself or anyone else at the NABERS team to talk about it more. Back to you, Anthony.
Thanks, Ron. But that was really, really interesting. In particular, it's interesting the way you can use it, not just to baseline the performance of one asset, but also to look at what succeeds in one asset to learn what you can do across the portfolio. So I think that was a really valuable insight. You're not just looking at where one win is, but where you can take that win and apply it more broadly. I think that was a really great takeaway that we had there. If you do have any, we do have a couple of questions that have come through. So I'm going to hit you with a couple of them just very quickly, Ron.
Well, hopefully I can answer
first
them.
one is, well, if you can't answer them, make up something really convincing. No, tell the truth, and if you're not sure, we'll come back later. Look, the first one is, do you think that NABERS indoor environment will ever become mandatory?
So I'd like to think that that might be a yes, but it's all dependent. So there's successes that can come in a voluntary tool. And of course, when we develop things, we develop to be a voluntary tool. But you might see, like with our NABERS energy tool, it then became mandatory in formal policy with the CBD, the BEAD Act, because of the benefits that we're seeing with how it could be used and how it helps industry move along, set targets, and basically move from a minimum level, set a minimum level that's acceptable across the industry, and a whole bunch of policy objectives that might sit behind that. So I'd like to think that similar benefits could be found with the indoor environment tool. but it's dependent on a whole number of things. It could be unique per state, could be dependent on what we're currently looking at in terms of national policy. And of course, it depends if it'll actually have a positive benefit to people taking it up and be willing to go through that process. I'm trying to,
and I guess I guess to some degree the market will dictate too, because when buildings have a strong indoor environment rating, people are going to see that and go, well, why doesn't the other building have a rating at all? And the market might start pushing people towards that as well.
Yeah.
As well as through legislative or regulatory means. The other question we had that's just come through is, someone just said they love that chart that showed the rapid rise in the number of rated buildings. I think it went, I think the last 3 years you added about 50 ratings per year, roughly. Is that something that you expect to continue this financial year? Do the numbers look like they're going to stack up and get you up over that 350 or 360 mark for financial year 24?
Yeah, so the way we're tracking now, we're already at the same point last year. We are already above how many were rated. So it's currently trending and we expect it to be, who knows what percent it might be, but we do expect it to continuously increase. And we're finding that as existing portfolios are rating more of their buildings, we're also finding new portfolios take it up. We're finding new sole asset owners take up indoor environment rating. So it does look like it'll continue to increase, especially as more there's an increased awareness amongst everyone on the value of having an indoor environment tool and the benefits of having a good indoor environment.
Just one last question. Let's see if you can make this one a yes or no, just in the interest of time. Does ventilation quality also take into consideration the cleanliness of ductwork, which plays a major role in indoor air quality?
No. I can talk about that a bit more if you want, or maybe in another question. But no.
Maybe we'll come back to that one a bit later. Someone did ask that question, so perhaps whoever asked that question, if the organisers behind the scene can take note of that, maybe they can hook right up afterwards, just so we can keep on going today and stay to time, not keep people here until dinner time. So thanks, Ron. Thanks for taking those questions without notice, and we're going to plough on. We're going to have a quick panel discussion for the next half hour or so. We're going to start off by just talking about the value of assessments. We're going to kick this off with, I'm going to ask Katrina a question. Katrina, while NABERS Indoor Environment assessments are voluntary, they're widely used by major property owners. Growthpoint's one of those. And you've got 23 assets that are rated and publicly available. What are the drivers for Growthpoint committing to getting their portfolio assessed and releasing those results?
Thanks, Anthony. Look, I would say number one driver for Growthpoint is tenant satisfaction. Obviously, tenant satisfaction is a broad term and encompasses quite a variety of aspects. And we do have an existing tenant engagement program that already targets quite a few of those areas. But focusing just on sustainability, environmental aspect, we thought, well, what can we do? What's our contribution? And what can we do to improve the tenant's experience? And our ultimate goal is to provide safe, comfortable, and healthy environment for people in our buildings. And as Ron was just saying previously, we recognized that there was growing evidence from the research that established that link between the quality of the indoor environment and productivity and health of its occupants. And we also knew that from our interactions with tenants and feedback we received from our annual tenant survey that comfort and well-being actually rank among the top ESG issues which are important to our tenants. So to effectively address those priorities, we decided to adopt the NABERS Indoor Environment Rating tool as our primary metric for assessing health and well-being performance of our buildings. And we just thought, look, it's a very proven, effective way to assess the quality of indoor environment. And it's also, we know it's a benchmarking tool which is widely recognized and used by many asset owners in the industry in Australia. And it also allows us to gain valuable insights, and we can utilize these insights to actually optimize the health and well-being outcomes for our people in our buildings. So we started, Ron was saying actually it's spot on for us. We started around 2020 with just a handful of indoor environment ratings, and then we progressively started getting more and more buildings rated. And then we went a step further, and we established a new target, actually publicly listed target, to maintain our NABERS indoor environment rating across the average across the portfolio above 4 stars. And to your other question of why did we decide to do this, to make this public commitment and to release the results? Well, it's simply to hold ourselves accountable and really just provide the transparency. Because as a listed company, transparency is a fundamental principle for us. And we just want to make sure that all of our stakeholders, which includes our tenants, have access to accurate and reliable information on our sustainability performance. That also includes, obviously, the quality of the indoor environment in our buildings. And we also found that having a public target is actually another external driver for us to keep on improving our performance. And this portfolio target feeds into our operational ESG plans, and all of them actually have specific actions that we want to achieve in that year for each asset to contribute to that overall target. And just recently, we established a sustainability linked loan with one of the sustainability KPIs linked to our NABERS IE performance. And it's with a bit more ambitious target than the public one. This just ensures that we also financially invested into improving our indoor environment performance. And look, at now it's a fourth year. Over the last few years, we've been working really hard to get all of our eligible assets rated and really resolve any issues that we find along the way. And look, we can say that this hard work and commitment, ongoing commitment, really starting to pay off, because we started with rating about 4.2, and then we got to 4.5 in financial year 23. And now we're actually inching closer to 4.6 stars, with almost 100% of all of our eligible assets rated. So I think that's a great result and really proud of it.
That's great. Howie, you guys obviously work with a number of different portfolio owners and property owners across the market. What are some of the tangible benefits that you've seen more broadly across from CIM clients from their IE assessments, their indoor environment assessments?
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. I think Ron and Katrina touched on a lot of them. Kind of the way and I might expand on some that maybe weren't, they didn't kind of touch on, but really kind of think about it in 4 key buckets and categories. The first one, obviously, is the health and well-being of tenants and occupants. And, we spend an enormous amount of time actually in there. The other 3 are probably more commercial. The big one is about attracting tenants, whether that's attracting new tenants or renewing existing tenants. It's NABERS has just done a phenomenal job of getting everyone aligned on energy ratings and water ratings, and basically that's become table stakes. And IE now, seeing how ubiquitous it is across the large REITs, I think 8 out of the 10 largest ASX listed REITs have NABERS IE ratings across their entire portfolio. So it's becoming a differentiator in attracting tenants that are concerned not just about sustainability, but also making sure that's not compromising occupant comfort in buildings. But more importantly, also just to renew existing accounts, to be able to say, yep, we're doing different things, we're introducing more sustainability ratings. The second one that we've seen with a number of our larger REIT customers is almost on the reactive front, that tenants are coming forward with this. Ron mentioned it, like one of the biggest strengths of the NABERS performance rating is you don't need to be a technical person to understand it, right? Stars are simple but very powerful, and that absolutely cascades down to the major tenants and the government tenants who are occupying. So a lot of them are demanding, in addition to their green leases, demanding minimum NABERS IE requirements as well to be met. As you can imagine, being government tenants, they care a lot about earning the commute back to work and making sure that the public sector employees are also safe in those buildings. And then the final one is really on the financial and the investor side of things. So we have, I'm sure Ron can answer these questions, but NABERS IE is also a big contributor to not just itself on a standalone basis, but also an input into other rating systems, such as WELL, as well as GRESB. So we have a lot of clients who obviously care a lot about their other sustainability metrics at an asset and a portfolio level, and that's a contributor for it. A lot of them will even go, look, it doesn't matter if we have underperformance. As long as we can get it in there, we still earn points and get additional points in terms of achieving those ratings. And then you have the leaders like Katrina and the team at Growthpoint, which is taking that step further and including it in part of their sustainability debt frameworks, which is something novel. In the past, it's mostly been around energy and water sustainability, but not tied into a performance measure such as IE. So it's becoming, hopefully we'll see that hockey stick increase further. And, we all spend a lot of our times in office and in built world. It's, we benefit. So those are some of the benefits that we see.
Yeah, I think you always back self-interest. At least it's having a crack.
That's what I'm all about.
So Ron, I'm going to throw you another answer from our audience, another question from our audience, and it's one that it's sort of something that both you and Katrina have mentioned. But you've kind of talked a little bit about that. There's an increase in asset value by having a better NABERS IE rating. Is there any independent research that proves that, or speaks specifically to that correlation?
So in short, there is, and I was actually trying to find that just before this because we've actually created a fact sheet, and it's actually on our website where we got that number, and for us to get to that figure, we referred to a study that showed that. I think the number was around 10% and maybe something around 7% on rental yields. But I do note as well that study, I think, was pre-COVID, and I'm sure it's different from pre-COVID to what it is now. So I didn't want to spit any figures out, but I'm not sure if there's any more recent research on that. Katrina, do you have anything else to add?
No, look, I would say, yeah, not in terms of the research, but what we definitely seen is that, as you were saying before, and as actually Howie was saying before, we are seeing some prospective tenants when they're looking at our buildings, asking more and more about what's your indoor environment rating, how has it been performing? So there's definitely growing interest on that side. So yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the technology that helps building and portfolio managers through this journey. Howie, how's CIM's technology helping clients? Firstly, in terms of making that initial assessment, we talked a bit about the baseline earlier on with Ron, but also how do you go about using technology to help you maximize that rating, which is, I think, something Katrina's kind of touched on through some of her comments.
Yeah, so this is it's a challenge, and I'd like to kind of talk about, we spend a lot of time talking about the importance of these ratings and having them. I think we don't spend enough time talking about how difficult it actually is to try and perform some of this stuff. So there's kind of a number of elements. One, why NABERS excels is because it's a level playing field. It's an independent verification. It's on performance data. It has to be assessed annually. So that is incredibly important to have as that standard measure. Now, the difficulty is providing the data to prove that you're meeting the benchmarks that have been set and that you can compare everyone. So one of the first challenges in getting assessed is actually just getting access to the data. And something that Ron said is, may have touched on, particularly on like temperature sensor data, you need to provide evidence that you have 12 months of historical data to demonstrate that you're meeting your conditions. Now, the way building automation technology is set up is it's not designed to capture that information historically. It's actually a very, very challenging thing to get that granular level of information. So a lot of vendors struggle just getting access to the data they already own to get out, which is where CIM and other building analytics vendors comes in, is to help unlock and get that data to prove to assessors like NABERS that we are actually meeting conditions, so that tenants can trust that, investors can trust that. You can't just finger in the air, say, yep, we're meeting our conditions. We did a spot check on a Sunday when it was cool, give us a high rating system. So that's the first one. The second element of that is how to actually maintain and improve that rating. So usually what happens is you may have to wait until the end of the year to find out if you've actually missed or exceeded a target. You're not actually being reactive, proactive in addressing issues. Issues can be as simple as a sensor basically falling off a wall, to as complex as we've got mechanical issues that aren't meeting, ensuring cooling and heating requirements inside that building. So being able to proactively address those issues is hard. So how to find and fix those problems. And then the third technological challenge, at least, and where NABERS does a good job, is setting benchmarks so people can actually compare their performance on how they're doing, on a seasonal level, as well as on a year-on-year level, to be able to kind of measure that level of progress. So where technology is really helping, particularly analytics, is really kind of in those areas. Getting the data out of the buildings so that people can make more informed decisions. To really leveraging the power of cloud computing and computers to be doing the heavy lifting of finding issues rather than using human labor and visual inspections. And then 3, obviously, making sure that something that I know Katrina's spoken about before is cascading that down as KPIs and targets, not just at the corporate level, but down to the individual site level teams, to make sure that everybody is kind of working towards the same goal.
Yeah, and that's something that when I've spoken to CIM's founder and CEO, Dave, that's been a big focus. It's just like the data's there. It's just actually getting your hands on it in a way that makes it useful has been the challenge for a very, very long time for buildings and facilities managers. So Katrina, do you want to just talk to us a little bit about the steps that Growthpoint's putting in place to make sure they've got a really good, strong process for getting that data for their assessments and improving indoor environment conditions?
Absolutely. Look, first off, I just want to say I strongly agree with point Howie's making. It was definitely our experience. So when we embarked on our indoor environment journey 4 years ago, we didn't fully know what we're gonna find, what challenges we're gonna meet, and definitely data was a big one. So a lot of our assets, and especially the assets that we might acquire, were definitely not set up for this adequate data capture. And so we quickly realized that, yeah, if you don't have those 12 months of data, you might actually end up being penalized, and you can lose up to 1 or 2 stars on your rating. So you might get 2-star rating where it's completely not reflective of the actual performance of the asset. And then another interesting aspect we actually found through our experience was that sensor locations and having thermal sensors actually calibrated and working properly is another important factor that needs to be addressed. So remember, once we did an assessment and we got really like preliminary score on thermal part of it was pretty poor. I'm like, what's going on? Because all the spot measurements were quite okay, but there was one sensor which was reading quite high temperatures, and we're trying to understand what's going on. So actually went on site, figured out that that sensor was located behind the vending machine. So probably the worst location there was, obviously trapping all the heat. And of course, that jeopardized our, our score and ratings. So, and we've seen some sensors located, next to the window, in direct sunlight, or next to air vent. So, look, that's probably an important learning for us. That's something we need to keep track of and address those issues early. But then, how can we keep track of all hundreds of those sensors across our buildings every day? So first step here was not that hard. It's just to establish the process at each of the assets, make sure that the BMS is set up, it can capture the data in that particular format, and then it stores it, and then it can actually back it up so we don't lose it. But then there was an issue with still how monitoring the readings, like who's going to look at it. We couldn't expect our facility managers to just sit there and watch those sensor readings every day. So started looking for solutions and tried a few. So one of them was getting like a consultant involved, sort of getting the data on a regular basis, looking at it, providing some reporting and insights. But the issue was that with those solutions that they're quite retrospective by nature. So by the time, you would have identified an anomaly, some time could have passed and it's already too late. So that's where we started looking, well, what about live monitoring? We actually saw SIEM and the PIC platform, and we actually rolling it out. Decided to pilot it at one of our assets, 75 Dorcas Street in South Melbourne. And look, I must say that I find this platform very effective, because it's got you can live track all of your sensors. It's even got the functionality to actually send you alerts when your sensors go out of acceptable range, and you can create alerts and allocate it to your facility managers or contractors so they can address it quickly. So it's very effective tool for proactively managing and improving this aspect of indoor environment quality. But then again, data and temperature is just one of our challenges, and we've got a few. So I'm sure that a lot of people on the call who've done some ratings would know that it's probably the most unpredictable compared to energy and water. You never know what you might discover on a day. We actually had an instance where we addressed the temperature issues. There were some historical issues. We fixed that. We put some monitoring in place. Come to do the rating, and the thermal score was great, but then the air quality score let us down. So you never know, and the only thing we can really do is just from our side to ensure that we really have a process in place to learn from those poor ratings and those poor results. And now any rating that we do, we really dissect the results. We really go into like what the other scores telling us, how Ron was explaining before, and work with our assessors, and to make sure that we've got those specific actions that we put forward to improve our asset performance moving forward.
Wow, that's a really comprehensive answer. Thank you, Katrina. You covered a lot of ground there.
Very technical, isn't it?
That's okay. That's great. Ron, you're going to love this. It's another question from the audience for you. Ron loves these because he doesn't get any notice. He doesn't know what's coming. So I'm not sure if he's happy or nervous about this. But we talked a little bit there, and Howie talked a bit about how CIM is helping with the extraction of the data around things like thermal comfort and air quality. It was something that Katrina touched on quite heavily in her answer there too as well. But what about the technology that's being deployed for lighting levels and acoustics? How are those being assessed? Because I would imagine that those are somewhat more challenging to assess in some circumstances.
Yes, so that's a very good question. And I set this with a little context of the way the indoor environment was either considered, measured, or managed, or even advanced in terms of thinking about the indoor environment is quite different than it was when this tool was first created. I think it was about, don't quote me now, 2009, and even since the last revision, which was since about 2018. And even from 2018 till now, there is a big difference on, so one thing, for example, and Howie mentioned it, where we can take annual data instead of just a spot measurement for our temperature. And, we would like to see, and we've heard, can we see this across other parameters than just temperature? And the thinking back in 2018 was we actually, the buildings that we have today aren't equipped, or it's a bit too expensive to try and equip our buildings with that now in order to measure it. So for example, if you wanted to take CO2 annually, if you wanted to take PM10 annually, what we heard back then was we're not yet ready. Buildings don't have it. It's a bit too expensive to do so. But what we're hearing now, and I like that you asked that question because I'd love to hear more about it as well, is that even just from the building side, we're saying, hey, our buildings are now actually equipped to record some of this stuff. If not, we're already recording it. And from the consultant or assessor side, they're saying how they're hearing more that people want it. They want something more comprehensive in the indoor environment tools. So to quickly answer that question and summarize what I'm saying is right now we have spot measurements for some of the other parameters with the annual temperature data. That one right now is done on an annual basis through BMS and data loggers, excuse me. But what we'd like to see, and we're asking the question is, should we be doing that to more? Should we allow for more than just a spot measurement on the day using our equipment that has tolerances in the accuracy of the device? And can we use devices that are set up all around the building to take annual measurements in multiple places, and we know that it might be more reliable? I hope that answers the question.
No, that's a great answer. And I know from talking to some of the folk at CIM, that data is not just valuable in terms of NABERS assessments, but things like air quality sensors, for example, and CO2 sensors help you better understand people movement and people densities in specific zones. So it's not, you don't just get the benefit in one place, but you can actually use that data more broadly and learn a lot about how your building is actually being used by tenants and so forth as well. We're going to dive in a little bit with the crystal ball and look ahead a little bit. And while you've got the microphone, Ron, let's just talk a little bit about how do NABERS ratings complement other rating schemes, and how can we expect NABERS Indoor Environment to continue to evolve as we go forward?
Yeah, so I saw that question pop through as well. I think it complements other rating schemes or other sustainability tools quite well. So for example, WELL and Green Star, it's not about being combative. It's about finding the right tool that is fit for purpose for your need and what you're trying to look for. And so NABERS, we actually work very closely with those organizations because we want to make sure that we're aligned with how the industry is evolving. Like I mentioned before, the standards and what we thought about the indoor environment is quite different from when these tools were made way back when. And what we thought was good indoor air quality is also changing, also with the consideration of philosophies or theories around transmissible diseases. So we want to make sure we are complementary, especially when there's overlap, and we want to make sure we're harmonized. And I think a key example or evidence of that is that, and Howie mentioned it, NABERS could be used as points towards other tools, towards GRESB, towards WELL, towards Green Star as well. And the idea, again, not to be competitive, it's not about just stealing market share and saying, hey, NABERS is the best. It's a really good tool, but the other tools are also really good.
That's a very, very good answer. Yeah. And it's got, because all those different standards, they do actually look and measure different things in different ways. So they are actually, for a large part, complementary rather than competitive, and they can actually work together really well. Katrina, do you want to talk to us about some of the future initiatives that you've got planned that will seek to better enhance the indoor environment and quality and tenant comfort at the assets that you've got?
Yeah, sure. Look, I'm sure someone said it before, but before we look into the future, you have to learn from the past. And, you know, as I was saying before, there was quite a lot of work we've done with our NABERS assessors, our site teams, service providers to really understand those factors contributing to the results, whether it's ventilation effectiveness, you know, particulate matter or acoustics readings. So once you actually understand the possible cause or causes that contribute to that result, you can actually put measures in place to address them and to adjust how we operate our buildings day to day. So, for example, you know, if we find that PM10 readings, which particulate matter readings, are quite high, it's actually quite a specific example where we did an assessment at site and found that on one particular floor, they were quite high. So we worked with the site team, we worked with an assessor trying to understand what's going on. And we believe it was actually because the carpet, turns out in that area, the carpet hasn't been steam cleaned for quite a long time. And we thought that might have been a contributing factor. So we saw it as a safety issue and health issue with, you know, needed to be addressed with the tenant. So we actually engaged the tenant, explained what it means and organized that carpet to be steam cleaned. And once we actually came back later and did another assessment, we found that those readings were back to normal range and it improved significantly, which, you know, was a great, obviously, health outcome for the tenant and also for us. And then touching on others, you know, this ambient, you know, sound level. So if they're too high, we might, you know, look at how we run our air conditioning systems. Maybe this, you know, the fan speed is too high. If it's, you know, carbon dioxide levels, we might need to introduce a bit more fresh air into the mix. So look, and again, as I mentioned before, those specific actions that we identify that will go into our ESG asset plans, and it's part of our governance framework that we have in place that ensures that those actions are achieved at asset level and contribute to our overall portfolio target. And we found that this approach definitely helps us to further enhance indoor environment quality at our buildings, and that's what we planning to keep on doing moving into the future. And then also looking ahead, we currently got already existing building monitoring program at our office assets, which historically it's always focused on energy and water, sort of energy efficiency. But we're now considering that we need to start including some temperature monitoring into that. So we're considering rolling out live temperature monitoring solutions, such as, for example, SIM, across more assets, and setting up ongoing, you know, temperature monitoring, which I mentioned, but on top of that it's also our annual cycle of operational maintenance activities, such as, you know, air filter replacements, which someone might have mentioned before, and sensor calibration and equipment health checks that can also contribute to that overall indoor environment quality. And look, and lastly, again, we're just going to continue engage with our tenants and ask them those ESG related questions, what's important for them, to make sure that we stay on top of the priorities and address them.
That's great. Thank you very much, Katrina. Hey, Ron, another question from the audience. Sounds like it's let's drill the NABERS guy today. Almost all NABERS indoor environment ratings are base cases. I mean, you know, they're focused on thermal comfort, internal air quality, and acoustics. What's the NABERS strategy to attract more buildings rated by whole building or tenancy?
Very good question. And yes, that's absolutely right. And anyone can actually see this on our annual reports. We show the number of ratings that I showed up on my graph, but also broken down into base building, whole building, and tenancy, and not just for indoor environment, across all the other rating tools. So it's a challenge that we've continuously seen and tried to navigate through, especially in the past few years, by asking a lot of questions. And some of the questions revolve around obstacles or barriers. You know, why aren't some more tenancies picking it up? You know, some of the barriers include it could be quite difficult to get sufficient responses to the occupation satisfaction survey, which is needed in order to get some of those ratings. And part of trying to navigate through this now is asking more questions as a part of a project I'm involved in to see, you know, one, should we expand the NABERS tool to other sectors, and what buildings should they be? For example, you know, hotels, shopping centers, residential aged care. And if so, how do we expand to those sectors? Can we do a copy and paste from our current offices tool into other sectors? Maybe the answer is yes, maybe it's no, maybe it needs to be more unique for some particular building types. So for example, hospitals, do we need to consider operating theaters or wards differently? And with those tools, should we be considering the benchmark and algorithm and the way we measure things the same way or differently? And this will tell us more about, okay, should we revise our existing offices tool, and have we learned of a way to change the tool so that it is either more appealing or removes some of the barriers for tenancies and whole building ratings? Does it make it easier for landlords or building owners to work with the tenants to get that? And I think part of navigating through that challenge and getting more of these tenancy ratings, because we've heard that tenancies want to get it, but there are just some of these challenges and barriers that make it a bit more difficult for them to take it up. Is that a way of us getting more? I like to think the answer is yes, which is why I'm asking the question. And if you have some inputs, answers, or opinions, I'm definitely happy to take them now. And if there was as good a time as any, it's now, especially while we're doing some deep research on this.
Awesome. Thanks, Ron. And just the last question before we get to Howie's presentation and demonstration for Katrina. And I'm sure this is perhaps one that you've had to encounter in your experience working across your portfolio, but how do you avoid the presence of tenants that can negatively impact site measurements? With more people back in the office, that can be a bit of a challenge now. And a perfect indoor environment building can be negatively impacted by higher occupancy or potentially, I guess, even maybe a recalcitrant tenant.
Yeah, look, an absolutely big challenge, but to be honest with you, sometimes you can't. So sometimes you actually can't avoid. We certainly found that some buildings where, especially we have high density of occupants, like, it could be a call center or, a business that operates 24/7, that definitely is going to be a continuous ongoing challenge with those high CO2 levels. We tried sort of maybe introducing some bit more fresh air, but then that also has a downside, because especially if it's a hotter month, obviously you introduce more hot air, then you need to cool it before it goes in, and then it can actually adversely impact your energy usage. So there's a fine balance you have to find, and so certainly monitoring those temperatures ongoing, and looking at what else we can do in terms of the working with the tenants. That's probably all we can do. Yeah.
Thanks very much, guys. We're going to hand things over to Howie now, who's going to do a short presentation and a demonstration on how some of this stuff happens in the real world. Howie, over to you.
Thanks, Anthony. Can you guys see my screen?
Gotcha.
Awesome. Actually, I just wanted to expand on that question that Katrina answered. That's such a great question. And it's something we see a lot. So it's not even just in terms of higher occupancy. We see often tenants doing their own fit out works and cutting cables and cutting sensors and doing all those changes, which can adversely affect the building. So the real question here is like, well, how we address the root cause of the problem? It may just have been there's been complaints and they're not addressed, and they've gone out and hired their own contractors, try and make changes, which adversely affects the score. So finding out about issues early on, fixing the problems properly helps address some of those issues, or if making sure that the building is designed to handle that level of that occupancy. So amazing question. And before I kind of jump right into it, I just love hearing from Ron and Katrina answers to your question, Anthony, in terms of the crystal ball and looking forward. And it's music to my ears that the best answer is, well, the way to look forward is to ask the tenants what they care about from an ESG perspective, and Ron asking the owners what they care about from the rating assessment perspective. And I'd like to think we spend a lot of time at CIM doing that as well. It's really just asking what owners and the operators really care about, and that really kind of guides our crystal ball. And it has to be fluid, has to change, has to meet the real world in terms of feasibility. But that's one thing that absolutely guides us. So without further ado, I'll jump right into it. So at CIM, hopefully you can see my screen. This is our kind of core company mission purpose, as well as our product vision purpose, is that ultimately we strive to help teams run better buildings with ease for a sustainable future. We're really focused on achieving that through providing data and putting that data in the hands of the people who actually run buildings to make better decisions to ultimately fix the problems that owners, tenants, and stakeholders actually care about. So that's a big piece of kind of our vision and our purpose. And I guess, how do we do it? The way we go about achieving that is really through 4 key pillars. And I'll go through each of these and expand on how that's done through NABERS IE. There's the collection piece. So the first thing that we do is unlock the data that the building owners already own. They already have access to. It's just not available. It's siloed in different systems. We've spoken briefly about some of the challenges of getting that data, but also how valuable that information actually is. So that's a big piece of what we do, is to understand with the owners the data that they care about. Really, often it's not everything. There's usually specific needs, whether it's getting, temperature sensor data from an IE perspective, whether it's getting water metering data to achieve NABERS waters assessments, and it's quite varied. But getting that data by itself isn't enough. You have to actually do something with it. It has to answer a question, and that's where our monitoring pillar comes in. Is that, as I touched on before, the advent of computing and cloud computing has meant that we can actually use computers now to 24/7 monitor the building for issues and not rely on someone to go to check if something ain't broke. And that's where really the secret sauce of CIM is. We have an AI rules engine we've developed over many years to really kind of automate that process of analyzing the entire building, every single sensor, every single equipment for issues. And then obviously just knowing about an issue isn't enough. Ultimately, what we care about is taking action and improving those things. So we spend a lot of time from our product capability of how do we make it easier for the teams on site to actually fix the issue, whether that's collaboration, whether that's guided solutions, whether that's actually being able to control the building directly to make changes. And then finally, on that pillar, it's about benchmarking. It's about, as Katrina's mentioned, it's setting those public targets. It's committing to those benchmarks. It's looking at a team is managing a building compared to its past or peers, and measuring progress to that and sharing that progress. And ultimately for us, what underpins all of that is that, from a software perspective and from a product perspective, we believe that real people run buildings. So every piece of what we do is to ensure that the tools work for the people who actually run it. It's not just built for consultants and experts who are coming on projects, but really designed for the people who are running the buildings kind of on a day-to-day basis. So I'll go into each of these, and we'll go into a bit more of an interactive demo. So on the first piece, we've spoken about, those of you who are familiar at the operationals level on the webinar will be very familiar with this view. Others may not, but effectively the data that's siloed and in buildings is often at the, people view the BMS as this magical software piece. It's not. It's usually designed to be offline, and it controls equipment. That is it is a feature, not a bug. A BMS, and it's purely designed to be offline and making sure that life support systems are working and everything is controlling. It's not designed to be in the cloud. It's not designed to save data. It's not designed to do complex calculations. That's what the cloud is for. So a big piece of what we do is being able to, you can see that's one of our hardware boxes, plug and play into the system to make a digital twin of every single data point in the building, every single piece of equipment, to allow solutions such as NABERS IE to fix, to assist with assessments, to improve broken sensors, and to lift sustainability ratings. So I'll go into that on the screen there. You can see this is what our dashboard views look like. So it's just this is a live building of anonymized. And in terms of the complexity, it can get as high as, in this particular building, 24,000 individual sensors inside this building, over thousands of pieces of equipment, rules being run across all of them to detect issues. And then we create a digital twin of every single zone temperature sensor. So just by way of background, most BMSs that we see aren't designed to store any historical data past 1 month, if that. So to get 12 months worth of data is an incredibly challenging thing. So let me see if this works. You guys can tell me. Can you see my screen there right now? Awesome. Okay, so this is our live dashboard. You can basically see all the information that's going through and a breakdown of all the temperature, not just at a sensor level, but an individual a floor plate across the building level. And you can see from our purposes, from a NABERS IE perspective, something Ron may have not touched on, is that NABERS IE does not look at every single temperature sensor in the building. They look at a certain number of critical sensors that the assessor nominates, and we're able to, in the platform, track the performance specifically of those. And then the team's able to take action on that. And beyond that, we look at, obviously, not just temperature sensors, but the platform looks at all equipment, all things that are basically affecting the operational performance of the building. So I won't go into that. I'll just come straight back into the screen here. I'll be jumping around a bit. The next biggest piece here in terms of actually once we make a digital twin is actually helping in the actual assessment itself. So as we mentioned, one of the biggest challenges is just getting a hold of the data. We see it all the time. Ron probably sees this all the time. NABERS IE assessments with a 0% score on thermal comfort because there was no data to be able to provide. The BMS wasn't set up that way. They couldn't provide that evidence. So once we've done that, it's literally a one-click solution to be able to export all that information out from the platform. This is used by the sustainability teams, the assessors, the operations teams themselves. You can see all the temperature sensor data for the sensors all on the platform. And it's as simple as whatever interval that you want, the granularity, hourly, 15-minute, whatever it is, be able to export that instantly into a CSV format that then is provided for the NABERS IE assessment. So really going away from back and forth between BMS vendors and setting up trends, waiting 24 months to get the data, to really one-click export to get all the information out. Very powerful in that respect. In the second pillar, I'll push through this, is the monitor side of things. So it's very important that we have the AI engine to not just having the data, but do the heavy lifting, do that 24/7 constant monitoring of all the sensors in the building. It can be as simple as a battery going offline to a sensor failing to something as complex as I mentioned of upstream failures in the air handling units or blockages in the VAV airflow areas, or it could be design issues that aren't meeting conditions during warm conditions. So the platform is basically picking up the exact root cause of this. And from an operations team perspective, it's as simple as coming in and doing a one click to assign. So you can see in the platform here, the alerts are coming up and they can simply basically one click assign the action to the individual to basically fix and leave a message. Hi, Dustin. Please resolve, which I'll go through in detail. Moving on to that, obviously just alerting the issue isn't enough. It's all about fixing the issue. I think Katrina mentioned, you see all the time. It's not just about fixing the sensor, it's about relocating the sensor. So a sensor may have, in this particular photo, been jammed next to a vending machine. Well, we need to relocate it. We need to move it out of the way. We need to nominate a different sensor. So it's making sure that that problem is fixed properly and not just band-aided to change the set point or do something like that. So it's incredibly important having that back and forth collaboration because it can involve 3 different stakeholders to fix an issue: the facility manager, BMS technician, mechanical technician, as well as the assessor to get involved. And you don't want to be lost in email and forgetting about that issue. So having that all centralized in one platform with the data is incredibly important. And finally, in terms of the benchmarking, which is probably the most important, is being able to see those targets, see those scores. So one thing that we've established inside our peak platform is the similar scoring methodology, the same scoring methodology that NABERS IE uses to calculate the thermal comfort scores, which is effectively the percentage of time during working hours that all your sensors and zones are within the ideal temperature conditions that NABERS IE sets. But having all that historical data, being able to track that allows teams to set KPIs. It allows asset owners to set those KPIs at the facilities management level, but then also for the facilities managers to set those KPIs down to their technician level to be able to resolve those issues. So as we said, you can't improve what you don't measure. And that's incredibly important for what we do. So going through those 4 benchmarks, collecting the data, making a digital twin of it, having the 24/7 monitoring to let you know when there's an issue before it breaks and not find out until the end of the year. 3, having the tools in place so that the teams are responsible for fixing these issues are fixing them and are working on collaborating. And then ultimately the 4th one, which is the benchmark and the targets. As I said, you can't improve what you don't measure. So in a nutshell, that's kind of how the IE solution works at CIM. It's a similar flow that we have for other use cases. So it's more broader than that. We do water monitoring, we do overnight operation monitoring, basically on any type of equipment performance. And ultimately, well, why are we doing this? Because we need a better way, right? Maintenance is outdated, maintenance is broken. You shouldn't be fixing, relying on physical manual labor to go and check every sensor individually. If you've got 34,000 sensors in a building, the old way shouldn't be go check them manually. You should be using data to take advantage of finding out when there's issues. So that's broken. There needs to be a better way, and there is a better way. And that's something that we absolutely obsess about, is that running buildings shouldn't be this hard. It should be easy, and we shouldn't be finger pointing and blaming everyone for not fixing those issues. So this is the kind of dream that we have, or the vision that we have at CIM. Everything that we do should be easy for the teams that run buildings to fix them. ultimately, as I mentioned, there's a few things that we're doing that we're very excited about. So just on that measure, I'm always looking to hear from our customers or prospective customers or users about the things they care about. Reach out to me. My email is there. I absolutely want to learn more. In terms of looking ahead, some of the amazing new features that we're also developing coming soon is a big cry for us is getting a better system to track sustainability ratings. So we are developing a cloud-based sustainability rating CRM to keep track of all sustainability ratings in a building, from NABERS Energy, water, waste, indoor environment, Green Star, well, all these ratings into that one platform. We're very excited about building and developing that and launching that out in the next couple of months. And we are also looking for beta users. So if you're interested in trying it out, reach out directly to me, and I'd love to have a chat if you want to try out some of the latest and greatest as it's coming out. That's all from me, Anthony.
With that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. We're right on our end time at the moment. So I want to just thank our panelists, Ron, Katrina, and Howie, for sharing all their insights